you are having an amazing day so far. All right, so today we'll be doing our grade 6 English lesson on pronouns and antecedents. So we'll be doing our grade 6 English lesson on pronouns and antecedents. And before we start with our lesson, we're going to log into aplusstudents.ca. So we're going to log into aplusstudents.ca. We're going to log in with our username as well as our password. Once you've logged in with your username as well as your password, and then you're going to select the subject of language arts. And then grade 6. All right, once you have selected grade 6, you're going to scroll down up until you get to the chapter of language arts. Get to the chapter of pronouns and antecedents. So our chapter for today is pronouns and antecedents. So the chapter is pronouns and antecedents. The subject is English language arts, grade 6. And our lesson that we're going to be focusing on under the chapter of pronouns and antecedents is to identify pronouns and their antecedents. So during the course of the lesson, we are going to give a description of what pronouns as well as what antecedents are, as well as examples there are. And we are doing our lesson on aplusstudents.ca. We're doing our lessons on aplusstudents.ca. And then we also have the chapters, subject, grade, as well as lessons. So if you do want to go back, recap on the lessons, then you can go to aplusstudents.ca. Also later on, before we end our lesson, we are going to go to aplusclasses.ca, but later on I will put that on the whiteboard. All right, so we said that our lesson for today is to identify pronouns and their antecedents under the chapter of pronouns and antecedents. All right. So a pronoun, right? So a pronoun is a word that takes the place of a noun or a noun phrase, right? So a pronoun is a word that takes the place of a noun or it takes the place of a noun phrase, right? And the noun or that noun phrase that the pronoun refers to, we call that the antecedent. So we say that noun or the noun phrase, which is the pronoun, that the pronoun refers to, we call that an antecedent. So the pronoun is a word that takes the place of a noun or a noun phrase. And that noun or noun phrase that the pronoun refers to, we call that the antecedent. And an example of that is Rachel is tired, even though she slept for 10 hours last night. So Rachel is tired, even though she slept for 10 hours last night. So basically, Rachel, right, is the antecedent. It's like the actual name of the person. And the pronoun is she. So instead of constantly saying Rachel is tired, even though Rachel slept 10 hours last night, we say she slept 10 hours last night. So Rachel, so she refers to Rachel, right? Which means that she is our pronoun and Rachel is our antecedent. So there we say the noun Rachel is the antecedent and the pronoun is she. All right, so if we look at the next example, it says apparently Tom and Sarah just landed. Who is picking them up, right? So them being the pronoun and the antecedent being Tom and Sarah. So Tom and Sarah is our antecedent and the pronoun is them. Because instead of us saying, apparently Tom and Sarah just landed, who is picking Tom and Sarah up? So instead of saying Tom and Sarah again or repeating the name, the noun again, right, we can just say them, she, ye, they, or so on. All right, so once again, we said a pronoun, it refers to a noun or noun phrase. And that noun or noun phrase, right, is the pronoun's antecedent. Example, Jeremy found a stray cat. He, which refers to Jeremy, took it home, which refers to the cat. So he is the pronoun of Jeremy, and Jeremy is the antecedent. So it is the pronoun of cat, basically, if we should put it like that, and cat is the antecedent. And last example is my father and I went camping in the desert. So basically my father and I went camping in the desert. We took a walk the first night out. So we is the pronoun of my father and I, basically. And my father and I is the antecedent within this sentence or sentences. All right. So now we're going to aplusstudents.ca, right? Where we are going to expand more, or basically we are going to, let's say, learn more or get more examples of pronouns as well as antecedents. All right, so now we're going to aplusstudents.ca. And we said we are doing the chapter of pronouns and antecedents. So we're going to the lesson. Remember, even though there's two lessons under pronouns and antecedents, we're only focusing on the one lesson, which is to identify pronouns and the antecedents. And a pronoun is a word that takes the place of a noun or a noun phrase. And we said the noun or noun phrase that the pronoun refers to, we call that the antecedent. All right? So the noun or the noun phrase, right, is the antecedent. And we made an example of Rachel is tired, even though she slept for 10 hours. And we said that she is our pronoun. Instead of saying Rachel is tired, even though Rachel slept for 10 hours, we say she is our pronoun. And our antecedent is Rachel. So Rachel is tired, even though she slept for 10 hours last night. Another example is apparently Tom and Sarah just landed. Who is picking them up? So, them is our pronoun. Because, like I said, instead of saying apparently Tom and Sarah just landed, who is picking Tom and Sarah up? We can then say Tom and Sarah refers to them. So, them being the pronoun. So, them being the pronoun and Tom and Sarah being the antecedent. Surprisingly, my brother's basketball team. So, my brother's basketball team won all of its games this season. So, its is the pronoun and it refers to basically my brother's basketball team. And my brother's basketball team, that phrase is called the antecedent. And the pronoun is its. So my brother's basketball team surprisingly won all of its games this season. It's referring to my brother's basketball team. And it's being our pronoun. And the last one is taking care of pets can be difficult, but it's quite worthwhile. So it is our pronoun. And the noun phrase is taking care of pets. So it is our pronoun and taking care of pets. That is, which is the noun phrase that is called our antecedent. So this is but a few examples, right, of either pronouns or antecedents, right? And we said a pronoun, it takes, or it is a word that takes the place of a noun or noun phrase. And that noun or noun phrase that the pronoun refers to, we call that the antecedent. All right. So now we're going to select the pronoun whose antecedent is the seasons. Some people believe that the seasons are caused by Earth's distance from the sun, but they aren't Earth's tilt, but they aren't. Earth's tilt, not its distance from the sun, determines the seasons. So basically, some people believe that the seasons are caused by Earth's distance from the sun, but they aren't. Earth's tilt not its distance from the sun, determines the seasons. So we now need to select the pronoun whose antecedent is the season. So if we look at that sentence, right, or sentences, can we identify the pronoun within that sentences? The pronoun whose antecedent is the season. And if we select the pronoun whose antecedent is the seasons, then we can say they. So they is our pronoun. They. All right, so they is correct. So we're not going to select the pronoun whose antecedent is Frank D. Roosevelt. We need to select the pronoun whose antecedent is Franklin D. Roosevelt. So Frank D. Roosevelt began his political career in 1910 in the New York Senate and then eventually went on to serve 4 terms as President of the United States. We need to select the pronoun within that sentences whose antecedent is Franklin D. Roosevelt. So Franklin D. Roosevelt began his political career in 1910 in the New York Senate and then eventually went on to serve 4 terms as President of the United States. We need to select the pronoun. All right, so if we select the pronoun, then we can say he's. So he's referring to Franklin D. Roosevelt. So he's is referring to Franklin D. Roosevelt. So his is the pronoun, and our antecedent is Franklin D. Roosevelt. And then we need to select the pronoun whose antecedent is Mr. Kim's daughter. Is Mr. Kim's daughter aware that she was chosen to sing the solo at the fall concert? So is Mr. King's daughter aware that she was chosen to sing the solo at the fall concert? And Mr. King's daughter, right? Our pronoun, if we were to identify the pronoun, we can say it is she. She is the pronoun, and Mr. King's daughter is our antecedent. All right. So once again, a pronoun is a word that takes the place of a noun, or it takes the place of a noun phrase. And the noun or the noun phrase that the pronoun refers to, we call that the antecedent. And remember, the antecedent is like, for example, either saying the specific actual name, right? It's like saying the actual noun. It's like the pronoun. I'm sorry, the proper noun. And the pronoun of that noun can either be his, hers, they, them, right? She, it, its. That can be just a few examples of either pronouns. And that noun, or the proper noun, like we said, or the noun phrase, we call that the antecedent. And our pronoun refers to it, and we call that the antecedent. All right. Now we're going on to our test, where we identify pronouns and their antecedents. We are now going to select the pronoun whose antecedent is John, James, Audubon. So we select the pronoun whose antecedent is John, James, Audubon. So John James Audubon was a famous naturalist and artist who studied birds. In 1820, the printer Robert Havell helped him publish one of the finest books of bird drawings ever made. So we need to select the pronoun whose antecedent is John James Audubon. And if I reread it, it says John James Audubon was a famous naturalist and artist who studied birds. And in the 1820s, the printer Robert Havell helped him publish one of the finest books of bird drawing ever made. We need to select the pronoun whose antecedent is John James Audubon. What do you think is the pronoun? Instead of saying John James Audubon again, what do you think is the pronoun that refers to John James Audubon? And John James Audubon is the antecedent. All right, so if we select the pronoun, we need to either select it him or her. Is John James Audubon referring to it as a him or referring to it as a her? All right, so if we select the correct one, we can say our pronoun is him. Because here they say Robert Haval helped him, and the him within that sentence refers to John James Audubon. So him is correct. We need to select the pronoun whose antecedent is the librarian and I. The librarian and I. So the librarian and I searched everywhere for the missing dictionary, but we couldn't find it anywhere. So the librarian and I is the pronoun he or is the pronoun we. And if you read it again, it says the librarian and I searched everywhere for the missing dictionary, but we couldn't find it anywhere. Yes, so if we select the pronoun whose antecedent is the librarian and I, then we will choose we. Because we refers to the librarian and I. So well done. Well done. Good job. We is correct. We need to select the pronoun whose antecedent is tobacco. In the 1700s, tobacco was so valuable that it was used as currency in many American colonies. So we need to select the pronoun whose antecedent is tobacco. Is it or was? In the 1700s, tobacco was so valuable that it was used as currency in many American colonies. So tobacco is the antecedent. We need to select the pronoun whose antecedent is tobacco. Is it or is it was? All right, so if we select the pronoun whose antecedent is tobacco, then we can say it was used as currency. So it referring to tobacco. We need to select the pronoun whose antecedent is your tongue. Your tongue. So your tongue does far more than just help you eat. It is also an important organ in the production of language. So we need to select the pronoun. Is it or an? So your tongue does far more than just help you eat. It's also an important organ used in the production of language. So we need to select either it or an. It or an. And that refers to, well, let's say the antecedent is your tongue. All right. So we can then say it is our pronoun because it is also an important organ. So yes, it is correct. So well done. It is correct. We need to select the pronoun whose antecedent is the ancient Olympic Games. The ancient Olympic Games. The ancient Olympic Games began in Greece over 2,000 years ago. Unlike the modern games, they were always held in Olympia, and only men were allowed to participate in the events. And once again, if we read it again, it is the ancient Olympic Games, began in Greece over 2,000 years ago. And unlike the modern games, they were always held in Olympia, and only men were allowed to participate in the events. So we need to select the pronoun whose antecedent is the ancient Olympic Games. So is it were or they? Were or they? All right, so if we select the pronoun whose antecedent is the ancient Olympic Games, then we can say they. And they is correct. We need to select the pronoun whose antecedent is Julia Child. Julia Child. Before becoming a cookbook author and TV host, Julia Child learned about French food while living in Paris with her husband Paul. So, before becoming a cookbook author and TV host, Julia Child learned about French food while living in Paris with her husband Paul. So now, if we select the pronoun whose antecedent is Julia Child, do we say it is her or do we say with? Her referring to Julia Child or with referring to Julia Child? So her or with. All right, so if we select the pronoun which refers to Julia Child, right, the antecedent Julia Child, then we can select that it is her. Because they say that while living in Paris with her husband, right? So her being our pronoun and our antecedent is Julia Child. And then we need to select the pronoun whose antecedent is Jane Goodall. Jane Goodall. At the age 23, Jane Goodall took her first trip to Africa. At 26, Goodall returned to Africa to study chimpanzees. So at the age of 23, Jane Goodall took her first trip to Africa. And at 26, Goodall returned to Africa to study chimpanzees. So we need to select the pronoun. Is it her or of? Her or of. All right, so if we select the pronoun, we can say it is her. And her refers to Jane Goodall, who is then being referred to our antecedent. And her is correct. All right, so that is basically under our A plus students.ca doing the tutorial lessons as well as tests. That is the pronouns and antecedents. Now we're going to A plus classes.ca. A plus classes.ca. Let's go to A plus classes.ca. All right, so if we go to A plus classes.ca, we're going to select learning materials in the top right corner. Once you've selected learning materials, we're going to grades and we're going to select grade 6. Then we're going to scroll down up until we get to language arts. Select language arts. Here we have 4 workbooks, right? We're going to the second workbook, which is practice grammar in the language arts workbook. And then we are going to scroll down up until we get to page 17. Page 17, 1, 7, 1, 7, 17. So 1, 7, which is 17. Up until we get to pronouns and antecedents on page 17. All right, so we are now going to do this activity on A plus classes.ca, right? And this is basically just an activity of the continuation of pronouns and antecedents that we did on A plus students.ca. And pronouns and antecedents, right? They say a pronoun always refer to a noun. And that noun is the pronoun's antecedent. The example, Jeremy found a stray cat. He took it home, right? Which means that Jeremy is our antecedent and our pronoun is he. And then cat is our antecedent and the pronoun it refers to the cat. And a pronoun must agree with the antecedents in number and gender. The gender of a noun may be feminine, masculine, or neuter, right? For example, Harry liked math and science. He always did well in them. So Harry, the pronoun of Harry is he. And them is the pronoun referring to the antecedent, which is math and science. And here they're saying it refers to gender, it can refer to masculine, right? So which means that gender masculine can either refer to it being either him referring to a man, her referring to a woman. All right, so now let's identify the antecedents within that sentences. So we're going to underline once the personal pronoun in this, underline once the personal pronouns in the second sentence that refers to a noun in the first. We're going to underline twice the antecedent in the first sentence. So my father and I went camping in the desert. We took a walk the first night out. So we need to identify the antecedents within the sentence. My father and I went camping in the desert. All right, so if we select the antecedent, then it is my father and I. And the pronoun, right? If we were to identify the pronoun also, then it would be we. That refers to my father and I. The stars seems brighter than back home. They seemed so bright because we were in the desert far away from city lights. So basically the stars, they seem brighter than back home. And the pronoun that refers to the antecedent, which is stars, is they. And then Jack went back and got out the telescope. It was brand new. So Jack went back and got the telescope. It was brand new, which means that we are referring to telescope. It was brand new. So it is a pronoun of that specific word. And then my father told me to look toward the east. He pointed at a light streaking across the sky. And if we select or identify the antecedent, we will say it is my father. And our pronoun is he. All right, so that is us identifying the antecedents, right, in the first activity. You can go over B by using pronouns with the antecedents, and the example is done. Jeremy read his report to the class. So then you can just complete B by using pronouns and the antecedents. All right. So that is now the end of our lesson on pronouns and antecedents. And we said a pronoun is a word that takes the place of a noun or noun phrase. And a noun or noun phrase that the pronoun refers to, we call that the antecedent. So that is the end of our lesson, grade 6. Thank you very much for joining the class and thank you very much for interacting. You should have a good evening further. Goodbye.